live. Today is June 7th, 2026, day 99 of the conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran. And I want to be direct with you from the opening second here. Today's stream covers three major stories, each one sourced to documented, verified, publicly available records, and each one connected to what the founders built and what the Constitution requires. First, the Iran War. As of yesterday, June 6th, CENTCOM conducted fresh military strikes on Iranian radar installations in Qeshm Island and in Gorak, Hormozgan province, after shooting down 4 Iranian attack drones over the Strait of Hormuz. I'm going to give you the military picture from both sides, verified casualties, named operations, specific targets, both the American and Iranian military statements side by side. I apologize for that noise there. We're going to shut. There we go. We had to shut that noise down right there. I forgot to do it before I began the live stream here. I apologize. Excuse me. And second, in today's live stream here, we've got California's government fraud. Not rumors, not partisan talking points, documented findings from California's state auditor's own nonpartisan office, federal investigations from the Department of Justice, the HHS Office of Inspector General, and the CMS audit that found California owes the federal government over $1 billion in improperly spent Medicaid funds. We're talking about documented losses of $55 billion in unemployment fraud, $24 billion in homeless spending with nothing to show for it, $8.4 billion allocated to cover illegal immigrants in Medi-Cal, and an estimated total fraud burden across state agencies approaching $250 billion with a B. And the third thing we're going to cover today is the current state of immigration in America. The documented numbers from DHS, ICE, CBP, the Migration Policy Institute, and NBC News Immigration Tracker. What is working? What the data says is falling short, and what the constitutional framework the founders built says about the government's authority and obligation to enforce the borders of the Republic. Every single claim gets its source today. Let's ride. Now that we're done with the introduction there, if you like what we're going to cover today, subscribe to the Revere Report and share this with someone that you know deserves to know the truth about what's going on right now in these three current events in America. Now, I want to open this segment by honoring something before I say anything else. American service members are in an active conflict zone as I speak today. Every fact I give you is given in the context of respect for their service and their sacrifice. The constitutional questions I raise are about process and governance, not about the men and women in uniform. So, we're going to begin with the foundation and how this war started in Iran. President Donald Trump announced major combat operations against Iran on February 28, 2026. In an 8-minute video statement, the joint U.S.-Israeli operation was named Operation Epic Fury. The opening strikes killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and dozens of senior military commanders, including Revolutionary Guard Corps leadership, which Iran confirmed. And the sources on that is CENTCOM on March 1st, 2026. CENTCOM reported more than 1,250 targets hit in Operation Epic Fury in the first 24-hour blitz, using Tomahawks, B-2 stealth bombers, and attack drones. Now, American casualties, and this is a documented record. I want to give you the documented American casualty numbers because every American deserves to know what this conflict has cost in human terms. On March 1st, 2026, CENTCOM confirmed 3 U.S. service members were killed and 5 others seriously wounded at a base in Kuwait during Iranian retaliatory strikes, marking the first American combat deaths of the operation. CENTCOM stated, "Major combat operations continue and our response effort is ongoing. The situation is fluid, so out of respect for the families, we will withhold additional information, including the identities of our fallen warriors, until 24 hours after next of kin have been notified." The source for that information is Al Jazeera, citing CENTCOM statement March 1st, 2026, corroborated by PBS NewsHour and AP. By March 2nd, 2026, the U.S. casualty count rose to 6 killed after CENTCOM recovered the remains of 2 previously unaccounted for service members from a facility struck during Iran's initial attacks. CENTCOM confirmed the update on X. Now, Iranian military actions documented from Iranian and Western sources. Now, let me give you the verified Iranian response, because on this channel we present both sides. Iran launched strikes across all 6 Gulf Cooperation Council members: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as Iraq and Jordan in the initial retaliatory phase. The sources were Al Jazeera death toll tracker, citing confirmed government statements. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps reported it targeted the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier with 4 ballistic missiles. A U.S. official told Al Jazeera that the Iranian attack did not cause casualties to the carrier. The Kuwait campaign, and this is detailed documentation. During the 2026 Iranian strikes on Kuwait, beginning February 28th, Iran launched 97 ballistic missiles and 283 drones at American and Kuwait targets. Kuwait intercepted the majority. 7 Kuwait soldiers were killed and dozens were wounded. On the American side, 3 F-15E fighter jets were downed in friendly fire from Kuwait air defenses. 1 CH-47 Chinook helicopter was destroyed. 4 U.S. service members were killed and 77 wounded in Kuwait operations. Kuwait's National Guard shot down 4 drones independently. Kuwait's Emir Mashal al-Ahmad al-Jabir al-Sabah stated publicly that this country was facing an unprovoked attack from a neighboring Muslim country, which we consider a friend, and to which we did not allow the use of our land, airspace, or waters for any military action against it. The source is the Wikipedia, citing Kuwait's Ministry of Defense, Kuwait's Ministry of Health, and CENTCOM official statements. Now, the casualty picture, total documented as of June 1st, 2026. According to Al Jazeera's verified death toll tracker, citing Iran's Ministry of Health as the source, at least 3,468 people have been killed in U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran since February 28, 2026. The victims were aged between 8 months and 88 years, They included 7 infants, 376 children, and 496 women. More than 26,500 people have been injured, including at least 4,000 women and 1,621 children. Preliminary figures show 3,371 dead in Lebanon and 28 killed in Gulf states. This source is the Al Jazeera death toll tracker, citing Iran Ministry of Health as of June 1st, 2026. I present these numbers because the Revere report presents the full documented picture, not a curated version. These are the Iranian government's own stated figures. American and independent verification of the exact casualty count inside Iran remains incomplete due to ongoing conflict conditions. Both the human cost to Iran and the human cost to America deserve to be known. Now, let's move on to Operation Project Freedom and the naval blockade. On May 7th, 2026, the United States conducted additional airstrikes on several military sites in southern Iran and Tehran. The strikes took place in response to Iranian targets of U.S. warships amid Operation Project Freedom, the U.S. naval blockade on Iran. Targets include sites near Bandar Abbas and Qasem Island. Iran accused the U.S. of violating the truce by targeting an Iranian oil tanker and another vessel. Large explosions were reported in western Tehran. President Trump has said that the pause on U.S. strikes is subject to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. While Iran has described the U.S. counter-blockade targeting ships seeking to access Iranian ports from April 13th as a potential prelude to a violation of the ceasefire, neither side has removed its blockade. Now, what happened yesterday, June 6, 2026? This is the most verified military action. CENTCOM stated on June 6, 2026, quote, moments ago, CENTCOM forces shot down 4 Iranian one-way attack drones that were launched towards the Strait of Hormuz. The attack drones posed an immediate threat to regional maritime traffic. U.S. forces subsequently struck Iranian coastal surveillance radar sites in Golruk and on Qasem Island to defend against further attacks. American forces remain vigilant and postured to respond to unjustified Iranian aggression in self-defense. The source for this information is a CENTCOM official statement on X, June 6, 2026. The critical threats project documented on June 6th that the IRGC Navy targeted one commercial vessel with unspecified weapons and fired warning shots at unspecified U.S. ships near Larak Island. According to Iranian state media, U.S. forces have coordinated the passage of over 100 commercial vessels through the strait over the past month, according to an unspecified U.S. official. The source on that information is the Critical Threats Project, American Enterprise Institute, on June 6, 2026. The U.S. also confirmed on June 6 that Iran launched 7 missiles at Bahrain and Kuwait. According to CENTCOM, 6 were intercepted and the 7th missed its target. U.S. Central Command denied Iranian claims that ships were fired at or attacked on June 6. CENTCOM stated on social media, U.S. forces continue to operate freely in regional waters while fully enforcing the ongoing blockade against Iran. Iran claimed it fired warning shots towards U.S. ships. CENTCOM denied the characterization of those shots as attacks on U.S. vessels. Now, the peace negotiations and where things stand today. Pakistani mediators arrived in Iran on Saturday, June 6th, for negotiations with Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsen Naqvi, visiting Tehran for talks with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, according to Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency. On Wednesday, June 4th, Trump had suggested a potential advancement could happen as soon as this weekend. The recent strikes have placed further strain on the fragile truce. Iran previously walked away from negotiations earlier this week, according to Tasnim, saying it would suspend talks and the exchange of texts through mediators. It would appear as though that position may have changed given the Pakistani minister's arrival in Tehran. This is CBS News Live Updates on June 7th, 2026. We all know that CBS and CNN tend to have a partisan-based news media. So we'll see how this goes. Trump announced the open-ended extension of the ceasefire and the continuation of a U.S. blockade until negotiations are concluded one way or the other. And that was an ABC News live update on June 6, 2026. The constitutional lens on the Iran war. And here is a documented constitutional question that every American, regardless of their position on the war itself, deserves to have answered clearly. The Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, gives Congress and only Congress the power to formally declare war. That is in the text of the document. It is not ambiguous. It is not subject to interpretation. It is written in plain language. On June 3rd, 4 days ago, the United States House of Representatives voted 215 to 208 to direct President Trump to end military hostilities with Iran under the War Powers Resolution. 4 Republicans, Tom Barrett of Michigan, Warren Davidson of Ohio, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, and Thomas Massie of Kentucky, broke with the Republican Party to make that vote possible. Cheers erupted in the House chamber. The White House responded to that concurrent resolution is unconstitutional, citing the Supreme Court's 1983 ruling in INS versus Chadha that declared legislative vetoes unconstitutional. Both arguments are rooted in documented constitutional law. The founders placed the war-making power in Congress to prevent any single person from taking the nation into armed conflict unilaterally. The last formal declaration of war by Congress was 1942. Every military conflict since, 84 years and counting across both parties, has been conducted without one. James Madison wrote that the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands is the very definition of tyranny. The question of who has the constitutional authority to begin, conduct, and end this war is not a partisan question. It is the most important constitutional question in America right now. The Republic belongs to the people who understand it. And those people should know that this question is live, contested, and unresolved today. Now, I want to go ahead and go over the second segment of today's little live feed here, and that's California's government fraud. This is the most documented government fraud in American history. The numbers, the names, and the constitutional betrayal, that's what we're going to go over right now. Now, I want to begin this segment with a statement that is important to the integrity of the Revere Report. What I'm about to tell you comes from the following documented sources: the California State Auditor's official reports, the nonpartisan office responsible for auditing California's own government, the U.S. Department of Justice, the HHS Office of Inspector General, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Federal Audit, the City Journal, a peer-reviewed policy publication, and direct statements from California's own First Assistant U.S. Attorney. Every figure, every one I give you has a documented source. Now here's what the documented record shows. A preliminary report commissioned in January 2026 and called the California Report, analyzing hundreds of whistleblower tips, estimates that fraud, waste, and abuse in California's state government programs could total $250 billion. The report calls it a systematic looting from state agencies, formally requested that the Department of Justice deploy FBI, public corruption, and complex fraud units to audit the flow of federal funds within California. The sources of that are the Washington Examiner, citing the California Report, January 6, 2026, corroborated by Newsweek and the Denver Gazette. I want to be completely fair here. Governor Newsom's office told Newsweek, directly quoted, quote, "If Trump is serious about fraud, great. He's got a partner in California in wanting to tackle it," end quote. The governor did not dispute the existence of fraud. His office disputed the $250 billion estimate was unverified. Let me give you the numbers that are independently verified, because even those are staggering. The unemployment insurance fraud, documented and admitted. California's own state auditor, the nonpartisan office that audits California's government, found that California admitted losing more than $55 billion in unemployment insurance funds, including payments sent to criminal networks and ineligible recipients. The state auditor labeled the Employment Development Department, the EDD, as a high-risk agency because of insufficient improvement in managing its unemployment insurance program. The agency continues to have high rates of improper UI payments, including fraudulent payments, and failed to meet acceptable levels in more than half of the measures on which the federal government evaluates its performance. The source for that report is the California State Auditor's official report, cited by the California Globe and the California Policy Center in January of 2026. The California State Auditor reported in December 2025 that EDD's unemployment insurance program had a fraud rate of 7.6% in 2023 and 7.9% in 2024. Applied to the state's UI spending, those figures suggest more than $1 billion in stolen taxpayer funds since the beginning of the pandemic. The sources for that is the City Journal, April 3rd, 2026, citing California State Auditor's December 2025 report. In January 2026, Phyllis Hope Stitt, a former EDD employee responsible for determining unemployment claimant eligibility during the pandemic, pleaded guilty to defrauding the program of more than $750,000. That same month, former Madera County benefits eligibility worker Leticia Mariscal was charged with allegedly embezzling $40,000 in food stamp benefits. The City Journal, April 3rd, 2026, citing DOJ and California court records. Let me give you the scale of the EDD fraud in terms every American can understand. California received pandemic unemployment funds from the federal government, your federal tax dollars, and sent payments to over 35,000 state prisoners, including convicted murderers. Scott Peterson, convicted of murdering his pregnant wife, received payments. Serial killer Cary Stayner received payments. The federal government warned California at least 3 times in the early months of the pandemic to strengthen fraud protections. California did not act. The result was documented in the House Oversight Committee. $32.6 billion in EDD fraud confirmed by analysis with the state itself admitted to $31 billion paid to criminals. The sources for that information is the House Oversight Committee letter to California EDD Director Nancy Farias, January 13th, 2023, citing KCRA Sacramento and ABC 7. Here's the homeless spending fraud. $24 billion with nothing to show for it. Bill Asalai, First Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, stated publicly in January 2026, quote, California has spent $24 billion in the last 5 years on homelessness, and no one can account for where that money has really gone, end quote. Asalai announced the creation of a federal homelessness fraud and corruption task force to investigate the handling of those billions. The task force has already brought charges in several multi-million-dollar homelessness fraud cases, and Asalai has vowed that more are coming. The sources is the City Journal on April 3rd, 2026, and it is citing the Department of Justice and U.S. Attorney public statements. It's crazy. These are your tax dollars, your federal tax dollars. Gavin Newsom and the government agencies in California are fraudulently ripping you off. Now, the documented result of $24 billion in homelessness spending, California has 181,399 homeless people, the highest number in the nation, representing approximately 28% of all homeless Americans. That is the documented return on $24 billion, not a reduction, an increase. And the sources for that information is the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development 2025 point-in-time count. Ridiculous, if you ask me. Medi-Cal fraud. The federal government is demanding California to pay back over $1 billion. And this is the story that has received the least mainstream coverage, and may be the most constitutionally significant. Medi-Cal, California's Medicaid program, currently covers approximately 14.5 million Californians, over 1/3 of the state's population, and accounts for $222 billion in total annual spending. It is the largest single item in the 2026-2027 governor's budget by far. The largest allocation within that budget is an $8.4 billion allocation covering illegal immigrants. $8.4 billion to cover medical expenses for illegal immigrants. What is that about? Why do we need to cover medical expenses of people that are illegally residing in our country? We should be shipping them out back over the border. In April 2026, Governor Newsom signed emergency legislation closing a $2.8 billion funding gap in Medi-Cal while guaranteeing continued coverage for hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens. Governor Gavin Newsom. The source for this information is the Daily Signal, June 2nd, 2026, citing California's Legislative Analyst's Office. Now, federal audits in late 2025 found that California alone accounts for the lion's share of $1.35 billion in improper federal reimbursements across several states. A CMS preliminary audit found that these funds were used to subsidize non-emergency services for undocumented immigrants, in violation of federal law governing Medicaid use. $1.35 billion in improper federal reimbursements across several states for undocumented immigrants. Federal officials demanded California repay over $1 billion. As of January 2026, no formal repayment has been confirmed. California's Department of Health Care Services pushed back, insisting the state is not misusing federal funds. The source for this information is the California Globe, January 19th, 2026, citing CMS audit and HHS statements. HHS Press Secretary Emily Hilliard stated on behalf of the administration, quote, "Protecting Medicaid from waste, fraud, and abuse isn't optional. It's the law. Every dollar misspent on illegal health care spending is a dollar taken from vulnerable American citizens." The source for that information is the California Globe, and it came out January 19th, 2026. The In-Home Supportive Services Program, $6 to $12 billion in annual fraud. Hayward Talcove, CEO of LexisNexis Risk Solutions for Government and a nationally recognized fraud expert, estimates that annual IHSS fraud could amount to 20% to 40% of total program spending. Applied to projected IHSS outlays for fiscal year 25-26, that suggests roughly $6 billion to $12 billion in losses annually. Multiple senior officials at the Department of Health and Human Services have described a similar pattern, estimating that about 25% of Medi-Cal budget is lost to fraud. 25% lost to fraud. That source is the City Journal, and it sourced that on April 8th of 2026. The Senate Auditor's high-risk list, 8 agencies officially designated. California's nonpartisan state auditor has officially branded 8 state agencies as high risk for waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement, warning of upended finances, compromised public safety, and crumbling infrastructure. The auditor's report found that Governor Gavin Newsom administration has upended the state's financial structure, compromised public safety, and left the state's infrastructure in far worse condition. The source for that information is the California Globe on January 10th, 2026, citing California's state auditor official designation. What are we going to do about this? The state response, what California's legislature says they're going to do about this. And here's the part that will require every viewer today to sit with their own judgment. In April 2025, State Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas sponsored a bill that would raise the threshold for felony welfare fraud from $950 to $25,000. $950 raised up to $25,000. The measure would also make it more difficult to charge perjury based on misstatements to county welfare departments. Republican State Assemblyman Carl DeMaio said that if the bill becomes law, it will effectively legalize welfare fraud in California. Our state senator proposed a bill that if it becomes law, it will effectively legalize welfare fraud in the state of California. That's our elected state representation doing us dirty. I'm not going to tell you whether that bill is right or wrong. What I will tell you is what the founders documented about the purpose of government. In Federalist 51, James Madison wrote that in framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. The California State Auditor, the government's own watchdog, has documented 8 high-risk agencies, $55 billion in unemployment fraud, $24 billion in homelessness spending unaccounted for, $8.4 billion in Medi-Cal coverage for illegal immigrants, and a fraud threshold to $25,000 is not an act of controlling itself, it's an act of removing accountability. Sit with that one for a minute. That is not a partisan statement. That is Madison's standard applied to the documented record. Fraud rampant in California under Gavin Newsom and the Democrat-run legislation in California. And on top of all that, the fraudulent voting that is going on in the state of California, above and beyond doing exactly what the American people have majorly voted against. They've got millions, 22 million mail-in ballots have been put out into the California communities, mail-in ballots that are supposed to be not even there, as voted for by you and me, we the people. 22 million of them have been put out into the communities and are now being sold, that's right, being sold to Democrat-run agencies to push the results of the voting in the midterms. There's so much going on right now that is unlawful and against what we the people want. That's why I created the Paul Revere Society, which the link for that society, a community that is based on American values, not partisan, no Republican, no Democrat, no liberal, no independent, just you and me, we the people. I need to get as many people as I can to join that community so we can have a voice in this country. Now, I'm going to move on to segment 3, the documented numbers about immigration and what's actually happening at the border and in America's interior. The full picture. The third and final topic today is immigration. And I want to approach this the same way I approach everything on the Revere Report. Not through a political lens, through the documented record. The numbers from DHS, the numbers from ICE, the numbers from CBP, and the numbers from the Nonpartisan Migration Policy Institute. All of them presented together so you can see the full picture. And here's the border. Here's what the numbers show on the border. Under President Trump's enforcement policies, U.S. Customs and Border Protection nationwide border encounters on June 2025 decreased nearly 88% compared to June 2024. The Southwest border encounters dropped 93%. Border Patrol apprehensions between ports of entry at the Southwest border decreased nearly 93% compared to June 2024. On June 28, 2025, Border Patrol apprehended just 136 illegal aliens, the lowest single day of apprehensions in U.S. Border Patrol history. 0 inadmissible aliens were released by U.S. Border Patrol into American communities for 2 consecutive months. Yeehaw. The sources for that information is the House Homeland Security Committee Border Brief. That was in July 2025. Those are documented, verified numbers. The border crossing reduction is real, significant, and historically unprecedented. The Interior Enforcement, ICE arrests and deportations. DHS reported that ICE arrested more than 675,000 illegal aliens from the beginning of the Trump administration through early 2026. DHS also estimates that 2.2 million illegal aliens have self-deported, choosing to leave voluntarily rather than face enforcement action. That's great. 70% of those arrested by ICE are criminal illegal aliens who have been charged or convicted of a crime in the United States. ICE now has 120% more officers and agents after hiring 12,000 new personnel. DHS signed more than 1,255 agreements with state and local law enforcement partners under Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 287. The source for that is the Department of Homeland Security official statement on January 20th, 2026. ICE arrests increased to about 1,200 per day, the highest levels since the Obama administration, combined with our arrests by CBP and other federal agents. More than 595,000 non-citizens had been arrested from January 20th to December 10th, 2025. The number of immigrants detained by ICE grew from a daily average of 39,000 when Trump returned to office to nearly 70,000 as of January 7th, 2026. And the source for that information is the Migration Policy Institute, where the independent data diverges from administration claims. Now let me give you the full picture because intellectual honesty requires it. Overall deportations remained well below the stated goal of 1 million per year in December. ICE stated DHS had removed 622,000 non-citizens under Trump through that point. The Biden administration carried out 778,000 total reparations in fiscal year 2024. ICE had identified 435,000 unauthorized immigrants with criminal convictions in the United States not in custody, including 13,099 convicted of murder and 15,811 convicted of sexual assault. As the end of May 2025, ICE had arrested 752 non-citizens convicted of murder and 1,693 convicted of sexual assault. The source on that is the Migration Policy Institute, January 9th, 2026, NBC News Immigration Tracker, May 2025. I want to make that completely clear. ICE identified 13,099 people convicted of murder living in America without legal status. And as of May 2025, ICE had arrested only 752 of those. 13,099 identified and 752 arrested. That gap, more than 12,000 convicted murderers still unaccounted for, is a documented shortfall between what the administration has stated as its priority and what the data shows has been accomplished. That is not a political criticism. It is a documented gap between state goals and measured outcomes. Here's where this channel's approach differs from every other program covering immigration. We do not debate whether immigration enforcement is desirable. That is a policy debate. We ask what the Constitution says and what the founders documented about the government's authority and obligation. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. Article 4, Section 4 guarantees every state protection against invasion. The founders were explicit in the constitutional text and in their own writings that a sovereign republic has both the right and the obligation to control who enters its borders and on what terms. At the same time, the Fifth Amendment guarantees that no person, not just no citizen, but no person, shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. That applies to every human being on American soil, including those here without legal status. The documented tension the founders built into the system is this. The Republic has the documented right to enforce its borders. Every person within its borders has the documented right to due process before being deprived of their liberty. Both things are simultaneously true, and both things are simultaneously required by the document. Under the aggressive enforcement push, ICE and U.S. Border Patrol agents surged into major U.S. cities. Federal immigration officers came under scrutiny in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Minneapolis, where officers shot and killed 2 U.S. citizens. Support for Trump's immigration policies declined in polling following those incidences. The death of American citizens during immigration operations, documented by routers, is the specific moment where the constitutional tension becomes most acute. The Republic's enforcement authority does not extend to the taking of a citizen's life without due process. That is not a political statement. That is the Fifth Amendment, written in 1791 and still in force today. A Signal poll found 60% of Americans support mass deportations, including 50% of Hispanics surveyed. Documented majority support for enforcement and documented constitutional requirements governing how that enforcement must be conducted. Both things are true. Both things are required by the Founders' framework. The Republic enforces its laws. It does so within the law. So, let me close all this out today with something I want to say with you long after this stream ends. Today we covered 3 things happening in your government right now on June 7th, 2026. A war now 99 days old, fought by American service members who have paid with their lives. 6 confirmed dead, dozens wounded, in a conflict that began without a formal congressional declaration of war that the Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, gives exclusively to Congress. Pakistani mediators are in Tehran today trying to salvage talks. CENTCOM struck Iranian radar sites yesterday. The ceasefire is crumbling, and the constitutional question of who has the authority to end this, Congress or the President, remains live and unresolved. A state government in California has lost or misused, by its own auditors' documented findings, $55 billion in unemployment funds, $24 billion in homelessness spending, and faces a federal demand to repay over $1 billion in improperly spent Medicaid money. A state legislature that responded by proposing to raise the fraud threshold to $25,000. 8 state agencies officially designated high risk by the nonpartisan state auditor, and an estimated total fraud burden approaching $250 billion by some analysis. And an immigration enforcement system that has driven border crossings to historic lows, a real and documented achievement, while simultaneously falling short of its stated priority of removing convicted murderers from American communities. 12,000 identified convicted murderers with criminal convictions still accounted for as of the most recent data, and the documented deaths of 2 American citizens in enforcement operations, raising the constitutional question of due process that the Fifth Amendment requires. 3 stories, 3 constitutional connections. Article 1, Section 8, the Declare War Clause, tells us that the people's elected representatives in Congress must authorize the commitment of American lives to combat, not one person, the people's house. James Madison's documented standard in Federalist 51, that government must control itself, tells us that a state agency losing $55 billion in fraud and responding by raising the fraud threshold is not controlling itself. It is the exact opposite. The Fifth Amendment tells us that every enforcement action taken against any person on American soil must honor the right to due process, not as a courtesy, as the supreme law of the land. These documents were not written for convenience. They were written by men who had lived under governments that ignored them. Men who had experienced taxation without representation. Men who had watched governments wage wars without the consent of the governed. Men who had seen citizens stripped of liberty without process or accountability. That is what the Revere Report is built to make possible, and that is what the Paul Revere Society exists to sustain. Subscribe to the Revere Report. Every subscriber helps this content reach one more American who deserves to know what we covered today. Share this stream with one person on any side of the political divide who still cares about the Republic. And join the Paul Revere Society. The link for that society is in my bio for this channel. I'm John Shoemaker. This is the Revere Report. The Republic belongs to the people who understand it. It always has. And that is we, the people. Ride with us.